Hello, YouTubers, friends, peasants, serfs, bottom feeders, enemies of the state. And for today's special, I also welcome Eurotrash, bureaucrats, revolutionaries, Marxist socialists, and civil servants. So, I want to talk about the Eurozone circle jerk. This has been going on for quite some time, and I had to figure out what my specific take was going to be, because you can get all the details you want as the story unfolds. Ad infinitum on any number of other sources. So I want to take an approach that makes this relevant for Americans and puts it in context of what's happening here. There's a lot of different takes on everything that's going on, and I happen to believe that this is all one story across the globe. Certainly there are variations in Europe and America, but we have a similar situation where all the banks took lots of risks, are completely over-leveraged, are insolvent, and they need our money to keep going. Delay and pray. Same thing in Europe, same thing here. So I think the fatal flaw in the Eurozone started right at the beginning in 1992 because they required a budget deficit of 3% and a debt to GDP of 60%. For all the nations entering the Eurozone. And of course, as we know now, not very many of the countries that are actually in the Eurozone would have qualified even by their own original terms. So the fraud and corruption started from the very beginning. And you have the core problem that is manifesting now, a mere 20 years later, is that it should have been a free trade zone and not a common currency. So now we have all the countries in the Eurozone cannot make their own choices and their own decisions in their currency values and adapt to their own economic problems. They're all in it together. They're all going to go down together. So there's four main problems in the Eurozone. And once again, these are problems that are very similar to what we have in the United States, and that's our banks are massively insolvent and over-leveraged. That is the very core issue across the globe. Banks are massively insolvent and over-leveraged. They've loaned hundreds of times out what they have in assets. Their assets are dubious at best, and they're all broke. That's putting it in the simplest terms. They've loaned out 30 times their capital invested in sovereign debt, and it can't be paid. Third problem, massive trade imbalances. How can you compare and unite Germany and Greece with their vastly different economies and cultures? And then the fourth big problem is the deflationary wave that's hitting across the globe. We've had these asset bubbles blown up, whether it was the tech boom or real estate, and it has to deflate. And as it deflates, all the values held by the banks go down, all their so-called assets and balance sheets. So at all costs, the Federal Reserve and the ECB in Europe have to keep these prices up so the banks will not have to take these losses. Because it only takes 2 or 3, 4% losses in a lot of their asset levels, and they're broke. That's how leveraged they are. So people who want to nitpick about the differences between what's going on in Europe and what's going on here, there might be some slight variations, but it's the same ball game. And you know, they've treated it as a credit crunch and a liquidity problem, and it's not. It's an insolvency problem. It's a structural problem. Interest rates can never go up. This is the permanent nanny state for the banking financial industry. They've tried all the normal, traditional public finance strategies here in the U.S. and in Eurozone. Reduction in government spending, higher taxes, delay the retirement age, reintroduce other wealth and property taxes and estate and gift taxes. We're seeing the same mechanisms in Europe and here. And once again, it's broke governments supporting broke banks who are supporting broke governments. They write each other checks back and forth. They swap money, and it's all smoke and mirrors, delay and pray. the pain is coming. They want to put it off as long as they can. And you cannot solve a debt problem with more debt. That is the lesson to be learned. So in the ECB, they now have a balance sheet of 2.7 trillion euros. And a lot of that is bad sovereign debt. So you have this web across the Eurozone of banks who are loaded up on bad sovereign debt and banks that are broke, propping up these governments. So these insolvent banks are propping up these insolvent governments, and that's the game in the Eurozone. And I think Americans need to pay attention because, for example, the events that unfolded in Greece is going to be the model, one nation after another. So you're going to have these austerity packages, you're going to have the strikes, the riots, the deaths, you're going to have more austerity measures, you're going to more bailouts. In May 10th of 2010, the first $1 trillion safety net that was supposed to backstop the Eurozone was created. So now they got another $1 trillion this last January through Fed swaps and the ECB. 523 European banks lined up to get something like 780 billion euros of bailout money, which they turned around and parked back at the ECB. So it's not going anywhere but to shore up broke banks and to buy more government bonds, more bad debt. So then in Greece you have pension reforms and the raising of the retirement age. We're seeing the same thing going on here. Ratings downgrades, more austerity, more riots. This is the pattern. And of course, Spain, Portugal, Italy, they're all coming up to bat. They'll be the next ones to go down. This pattern will be repeated. And the developments that are going on are just perplexing. It's like everybody wants to ignore the reality of the situation. And for instance, Croatia joining the Eurozone at this juncture. No doubt it is a lot of elites in Croatia who are going to get on the gravy train if they become part of the European Union. There can't be any other reason to join it. The Eurozone agreed on an Iran oil embargo. That's shooting themselves in the foot at a time they can not afford it. Paris and Berlin are trying to dilute Basel III bank rules. So, of course, here we have this banking catastrophe in the last 3-4 years. And the banks are fighting any attempt to regulate their gambling operations. You know, you have all these countries being downgraded: Spain, Italy, Ireland, Cyprus, Belgium, Slovenia, France, Austria. There's more downgrades to come. Even the EFSF, the financial bailout mechanism, was downgraded. That can't be good. But the biggest problem they got coming up right now, and a reason why there's a great deal of panic, is because a lot of these countries have to roll over a huge amount of their short-term debt coming up in by March. Italy, 428 billion euros, France, 367 billion euros, Germany, 285 billion euros, and none of that even includes new borrowing. So huge amounts of money and debt have to be serviced within the next few months. So that's why the ECB is setting up another huge bailout in February, and the banks have already told them that they're going to be taking 2 or 3 to 4 times what they took last time. So we're going to see another $2-3 trillion. And of course, every time they throw these numbers around, it's not the actual numbers. So just as a rule of thumb, any number they give you, if it seems wrong, either cut it in half or double it. In this case, double it. So we're probably looking at $3, $4, $5, $6 trillion probably going to go out to these European banks. A lot of it's probably going to be more currency swaps of the Fed, if not more direct bailouts. So this is a tragic situation. European countries are not going to grow out of this. They're all in contraction right now with very high unemployment rates. 22% in Spain, 9% in Italy, 13% in Portugal. It goes on and on and on. They are not going to grow out of this. They're not going to inflate their way out of this. It doesn't matter how much they raise their taxes. It doesn't matter how much austerity they instigate. So, once again, I want to point out why this is relative to Americans, because it will come here. The same structural problems we had before in the U.S., in our banking system, are still in place, and in Europe we have the same thing. So this is a tragedy of epic proportions. The Eurozone will not survive in its present form. That would be my prediction. And we're going to see this same pattern of degradation in culture. Here's a good rundown. So in Greece is the model. They're the beginning. It was the cradle of democracy, and now it is the cradle of the demise of democracy. That last stand in the current negotiations, where Euro commissioners would come in from Brussels and basically control Greece's budget and economy. This is the final step in banker occupation in Europe. It's already complete here. Our government's been co-opted. So this is the breakdown of Europe for banker occupation, for all their governments to be co-opted, just like the government in this country. So in Greece, we have 45 to 50% of the population work for the government to begin with. They have a very corrupt tax system. So unemployment is now 18.8%. 75 billion euros has left the country in capital flight, bank runs. 68,000 out of 300 businesses have closed since 2010. They may lose up to 60% of their GDP. One-year bond yields hit as high as 415%. They have a trade deficit of 10%. There's the heart of the reason why, no matter how much they cut spending or raise taxes, they're not going to get out of this hole. And what's going on in Greece will also signal to Portugal, Spain, Italy, Ireland, everybody that's been up to bat, everybody that will be up to bat, and they're going to want to renegotiate their terms. And this also undermines the faith that the investment crowd can have in some of their exotic financial instruments, in this case, credit default swaps. If they find a way to have Greece default and not pay on these credit default swaps, it's going to create a lot of turmoil in the derivatives market. So in Greece, right now, they started with a potential haircut to bondholders of 20%, and then it went to 50%, then it went to 68%, now it's to 70%. I guarantee that it will eventually be 100%. Debts that cannot be paid will not be paid, and that will be the trend. It doesn't seem like it now, but it will be 100% haircuts. And of course, this is after Trichet said there will be no haircuts. And I believe Trichet, the old head of the ECB, he's also the one that said Greece will not leave the Eurozone and Greece will not default. So that's our other lesson here, is watch what these people do, not what they say. They have been talking about these emergency meetings, secret meetings, financial instruments, exotic instruments, loans, bailouts, promises. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's been smoke and mirrors since the beginning. This is all coming down. The Eurozone will not survive in its present form. And I think, for me, this fits into an obvious trend of disintegration and the new blueprint for the new feudalism. Historically, all artificially constructed empires will deconstruct, whether it's the old Habsburg Empire or the Soviet Union, or on a smaller scale, you have countries like Iraq, who should eventually break into Shiite, Sunni, and Kurd zones. Yugoslavia is a good example. All these areas will have to break down into their smallest components, ethnic rivalries and different political systems. It's a historic trend. Ottoman Empire. You have so many examples. So I think the world will break down into its smallest components, and I think we might be surprised how that does unfold. There's even been speculation that things could change in the unity within the United States. Hard to believe, but historically, we live in our modern times is a very short epoch by any standards. So I think the trend would be for more breakdown and more establishment of smaller units that will not be sovereign nations as much as they will be financial districts. So that is the new feudalism. So the term debt slave is accurate as much as it's thrown around. And I think the last thing I could probably do is recommend this book. It's called A Primer on Government Spending. And I recommend this to all of you Euro bureaucrats and surrogate banker leaders and everyone else that's working in Europe, because obviously you don't know anything. So here's a primer on government spending, and this book was from 1963, but right on the back it says, can the government go on spending more money than it takes in? Can the national debt continue to rise without bankrupting us? Who will repay this enormous debt? Will government spending ruin our currency, or is government spending the key to prosperity? So read up, folks, because you're smoke and mirrors. It's not working anymore. The euro's going down. This same model will be applied globally. And I think my final bottom line on this is that when you look at these events unfolding, on the surface is one narrative. And I think it's important to keep in mind that underneath all the current events that are going on throughout history, there's another narrative. And in this case, the other narrative are the true events and the true motivations. Follow the money. And you will see that we have a shadow banking system. We have a bankrupt system, banking system that the public gets to see. And we have corrupt bureaucrats. We have nanny states. We have welfare states. This whole machinery is grinding to a halt, and it was a controlled, constructed demolition. The Eurozone has to be taken down, just as the United States has to be taken down. We're in an era of complete globalization, and the new feudal system will be the model, just as it was spelled out at Davos recently. They're talking about the failure of capitalism. These are the industrial leaders of the known world getting together talking about the failure of capitalism and laying the groundwork for the future system, which goes into the New World Order concept. The New World Order is not going to be modeled after Western countries. The New World Order model is China. And it will be the capitalist system with central planning. And we've already got it here. It's crony capitalism. So this is the future. It is here. Watch the Eurozone closely, because there are lots of lessons to be learned and lots of clues as to what's in store for us.